Welcome to CPTM Smart Partners Hub. Today is 10th of May, and we were supposed to be to have quite warm weather in London to welcome Tanshi Omar and George Christodoulidis, George from Cyprus, Omar from Malaysia, in addition to ourselves who are kind of trying to get a bit of sunshine through them. But I'm sure by next week or so the weather will improve. But I must say it's quite cool in many ways. So at the hub in the last few days, there was quite an activity, and we have in fact Omar alerted everybody about the fact that there will be an intensive week of think tanking and dialogues and discussions and with CPTM fellows, with members, particularly in relation to the overall strategy of the Smart Partnership Movement and the CPTM. As we've seen in the last few days, most of the members or associated smart partners with our processes of interactions are referring by now to us, to this group, not as CPTM or as Smart Partnership Movement. In short, as we discovered yesterday from High Commissioner who never came here, from Bahamas and so on, in short, they are referring to us as Commonwealth Smart Partnership. Now, this is more or less an evidence of the kind of message you wanted on behalf of the board to pass on and to get some question and answers today from members who are at the hub and those who sent some questions, which I'll read them from virtually. But a message from the hub in relation to the reinstatement of the value of the smart partnership approach probably is very necessary, particularly in view of the next few months that will allow us to participate in each and every country that wishes to bring in the new dimensions of data, and which cropped in without necessarily we planning it since 2013 in Dar es Salaam at the Smart Partnership International Dialogue. And when I say it cropped in, we were quite informed about what may come in, and we all kept abreast with ahead of what other institutions or networks and so on with what is coming in. But the surprise that we had all the time was that at all levels of Smart Partners links, like Smart 29ers, Labour, civil service, wherever interactions took place, heads of government, the issue of data came about without necessarily a kind of being put in the right way. And I'm sure that those who joined you at the hub will be making from their own experience some points towards that. So the idea was that starting with June onwards, we'll have an intensive kind of preoccupation in approaching this issue of leveraging the value of knowledge and value of data. And we should say that by doing so, they will be pushing the limits of the CPTM as we know it, but we have a fabric which we can build on and pushing the limits beyond where we are at the moment. So now you are joined by, in addition to Dr. Christodoulidis, George, by Professor Catherine Peckham. Maybe you want to introduce yourself to say, remind everybody what is your background, Catherine?
I'm a paediatrician and epidemiologist, so I'm interested in the population basis for child health.
Therefore, use of data.
Yeah. So data is absolutely essential.
Okay. Jim?
No question.
You are involved in Mauritius 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah?
On science policy.
And policy work.
Well.
Quite a lot of policy work, yeah. Robert?
Well, I historically was involved in the regulation of radioactive waste, and tracking radioactive waste involves a great deal of data.
Okay, or use of data. I don't, this is a whole question that Omar
And
is
storage
going
of
to-
data as well.
And quite a lot of
Preservation
smart
of
partnership
data.
to do that, probably. Kate?
I'm Kit Verdes. I have a general interest in many of these things, and one-time scientist and diplomat and so forth. I'm interested to see how these questions come together.
But you've been a former diplomat, and also looking at the way finances are being spent by those who are in that function. So again, data is quite. And Anna, you are specialist in blockchain lately.
No, I'm not. I wanted, that's one thing I'm
You
not.
just sent here. I have evidence. Here.
I
I'm
sent
going
you
to give
the
it to Omar.
information to say that I think maybe it would be an interesting topic because it's to do with blockchain and charity. And is it a good way of sending money? Because they say that it can be traced in each sort of leg of the journey. But I'm interested in social issues and also in politics. Whether that's a good or bad, but there we are.
Okay, well that's data for sure, of a kind. Okay, so Omar?
Some time ago, when we were discussing about revisiting smart partnership, I wrote something for the benefit of directors and people in CPTM. And at that time I call it the imperative for smart partnership in countering the emerging global disorder. But I think for the purpose today, maybe we can revise the title into reaffirming the relevance of the Commonwealth Smart Partnership Initiative. And what I wrote, I'm going to read a little bit from what I have written earlier. I think what I said was, the world is undergoing a drastic paradigm shift from the open global economic system into a more exclusive, isolationist and protectionist regime driven by the rise of the post-truth, alt-right and divisive sectoral nationalism. I think you know what I was or what I'm referring to. On the top of that, we are also being led into an era of increasing conflict and divisiveness among citizens within countries and among nations across the globe, rather than becoming a world more harmonious, prosperous, and sustainable. The Me First doctrine is gaining momentum, especially sadly in parts of the developed world. And I'm glad this is not correct in relation to France last week and in relation to the Netherlands a month or so ago. I'm not sure whether the same can be said for Britain with Brexit. It has been said that capitalism, the driver of prosperity, is based on capital, liquidity, and trust, especially smart trust. This is not my word. This is somebody else who said this, smart trust. And smart trust is based on judgment, which in turn is anchored on credibility, transparency, integrity, and equitability. Sadly, however, an increasing all-round trust deficit is the order of the day. So more than ever, therefore, the world needs smart partnership, and it is time, therefore, to re-articulate the principle and practices of smart partnership. Then, of course, we want to know what is smart partnership. Well, there's a long story about smart partnership, starting way back in 1995. But over the years, after 9 dialogues in Malaysia, 10 in the Southern and East Africa, and 2 in the Caribbean, smart partnership is a consensus of a set of commonly agreed ethical guidelines of conduct, having economic value, an economic asset, and a moral value. It is both a philosophy and a framework for relationship among all players in any form of human engagement, embracing both social and developmental relationship. Then we talk about a smart partnership can be summarized as cooperation, collaboration, partnering, and any form of human relationship based on shared vision, long-term commitment based on evolving common objectives that goes beyond strategic alliance. I keep saying the strategic alliance is a marriage of convenience. Smart partnership is a marriage of love. And in a marriage of love, you eventually get used to your husband snoring and your wife nagging. So it's a long-term commitment based on evolving common objective that goes beyond strategic alliance, fair and equitable outcome for all partners, and ethical values based on respect, integrity, trust, transparency, tolerance, and accommodation. And smart partnership is engendered through a continuous smart engagement of all stakeholders, which allows for synthesizing commonalities, recognizing and respecting differences, and making room for them, sharing of experiences, voicing concern, and encouraging informed decision at personal, institutional, national, and international levels. The issues at national level can be about national cohesion and unity, stability and prosperity. The issues at international level can include globalization, international trade, geopolitics, sustainability, science diplomacy, digital communication, and data use. Now, in conclusion, the relevance of smart partnership principle and practice in the current uncertain and trust deficit global environment is clear. The future cannot be the me first doctrine, which is now seem to be engulfing America. It has to be the we all first paradigm through smart partnership. So let me, and then Mahara has always been talking about the smart partnership movement. So what is the smart partnership movement? Smart partnership movement is about promoting and fostering the smart partnership smart partnership, which consists of the principle of smart partnership and the practices of smart partnership, and the application of that in any situation of interest to any country. And we have been promoting the idea of technology inclusion, financial inclusion, quality and standards, looking at all that in the context of the principle and the practices of smart partnership, so that the outcome is a win-win for all the stakeholders, win-win based on equity, not win-win, it's not like equal, but more equitability. And one of the current thing of concern to everybody is, of course, big data. And to decompose big data through the smart partnership principle and practices. Because we hear about the importance of big data, but we do not really know what is important, what data do you need that is real time, what data do you need which is accumulated over time, and what data is useful for whom, for what purpose. At the moment, they just say it's big data, and everybody is selling the idea of big data everywhere. So many conferences and seminars that you have to pay for to understand big data. And every time I listen to that, I still got confused, just like I got confused about blockchain. There's a block here somewhere that refused to understand what that is.
Don't call it blockchain anymore.
So-
Call it distributed ledger.
So that will be more confusing for a person who has no knowledge of accounting. Anyway, so that's by way of saying that we need to reaffirm the values of what we have been promoting all this while, which is the Commonwealth Smart Partnership Initiative, and that is made up of the principles and the practices thereof. So I'll stop here, and then maybe the others can pick this up and maybe put that into some context, because that is applicable in any in any new issues or even old issues, and that is applicable in every country. And I cannot get a better example of the opposite of smart partnership, which is America first, which is really contrary to what we believe and what we are promoting from here, the CPTM Hub. Thank you.
And you talked about think tanking at the White House on smart.
We have to bring this idea to smart partnership to the center of the world, because they think they are the center of the world.
Smart partnership first.
First time. That's a very good idea. You hear that? Smart partnership first. Exactly.
Switch it round.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, George.
Well, we are here a
I said
group
it's
with
seniority, that's why.
lots of experience and knowledge,
Yeah.
and sharing experience and knowledge is so important. Well, we are talking about knowledge for development, and knowledge you need it in order to understand the components of a problem, how you will approach it. And knowledge in this world that is, there are so many sources of information, data is so important. And you talk about data, you process them through statistics, and you arrive at relationships, and from it there is understanding of the relationships, and then you can go ahead to tackle a problem, solve the problem. So data is so important, but I noted a word or comment by Omar. He is confused about a few things, and confusion is not only when you don't know anything. Confusion can come in when you know many things. You still you are confused at a higher level. I can tell you a little joke or story from the academic background, which is mine. At the graduation ceremony, we selected the best student to say thank you for what went on and his experience and so on. And he stood up, a very clever boy. He thanked everybody, his professors and so on, and the co-students. He said, I must admit one thing. When I came in 4 years ago, I was confused about a number of things. Now, after studying here for the 4 years, I'm still confused at the same things, but at a higher level. So the process of education is raising the level of your confusion. You know a little more about things, but then there are still things that need further investigation. So don't be 100% sure about what you know. There is still a way and a method of raising the level of your confusion. So what about your experiences and what about your own? And this is my contribution in this, how to arrive at a solution and progress things further.
Okay, well, I don't know if we are going all around or somebody immediately would like to. You did say smart partnership first.
Right.
What did you
Well,
mean by
that was
in relation to
in
Omar?
relation to yes.
I think
Tell
I
us about
could
your
pick up
statistics.
Yeah.
I do pick up one point about that. Very interesting idea of the fact that getting confused at a higher level and so forth. I don't know if people have saw the program on Panorama, which you could download anywhere on the web on Monday night, which was basically a criticism of Facebook for what they weren't doing
Yeah.
to control
Yeah.
what was happening in many ways on the web. You know, we've watched over the years, people started off with some very, very good ideas and a nice feeling about what could be done about having this freedom that you would have of the interaction on the web. Okay? And it was very much in an academic context, and we don't want any regulation of that. No, nobody should interfere and all that sort of thing. Some of the comments which were coming up then on the Panorama program was, many of these things are so complex and so forth, you can't even see how you could regulate it. You know, how people could regulate it. And there are things now, it's quite useful to see that, that program, about how they can pick up, knowing some data about individual people, the people who are actually the owners of Facebook pages and so forth, and other stuff which is going around in order to target messages and so forth at them as advertising, and how much money in effect Facebook are making by doing that, you know, about the using data and so forth in that way. But we've got a real problem now about how we look at dealing with all that data that's out there. We were talking about questions about fake news. Can you identify what news actually is fake and so forth now? It used to be that what was broadcast and so forth was broadcast under certain ideas, at least, of principles about fairness and truth and checkability and all of those sorts of things on the mainstream media. Now the media has spread right across the web, and almost anybody can publish, as it were, anywhere. Very difficult to see what there is that is fake and news and otherwise. That's one sort of the issues. Another of the issues is, of course, of those people who want to exploit other people by using data and so forth, and by cheating people in one way or another on the web, and the criminality which and so forth is going there. The fact is, what one wants to see, what can see, is huge amount of data and information is available. You can see through programs just like watching that about how people can set up various systems and so on for bringing information, getting information and using it for one way or another. In their case, of course, usually it's advertising or political advertising and so forth that is there, but there are also other ones. But it was a good example of seeing just what confusion and so forth one can have about the amount of information that's there and the amount of stuff you could do with it.
Actually, the two aspects, the value of data and the value of knowledge, they go together. And we specifically actually added to the value of data, leveraging value of data, the value of knowledge, because it's the confusion and the
more
kind
data,
of new economy on
more
data.
data is better knowledge.
Not necessarily. That's the whole point. So
I think the first thing we need to do is define what you mean by data. I think that the big data sets are not that data, the social data. And what I would like to see is knowledge through data, not because I think that you have to ask the questions. You have to know about the content of the data, the quality of the data, where it comes from, how reliable it is. Because I think people can use data in a very wrong way in answering questions because they want the answers they want. And it's very easy to do that with data, very. And I think that you need to start from the point of why is the data being collected, what is it for, who is it for, and all this business about sort of evidence-based political decisions. I mean, it's absolute nonsense, that. it's far too complex for politicians to understand the evidence of data. They're much more influenced by the anecdote and by other issues and by the social media. So I think you need to start defining what you mean by data, because I think it means different things to different people. And its use really determines on what
does it
data
mean
is.
to you, data?
To
as
me,
a
I would say
scientist?
knowledge through data.
Ah.
So I would ask the questions, what I want from the data, so that I gather the data in a way that it can answer the questions that I would like to address. And I think there's a confusion because data is all lumped together as a big sort of blob.
In fact, we
And I
had
think
Professor.
that
We had
the data
Professor.
you were talking about was
Yeah.
the social data is very, very important, but it's different.
It is very different. Professor David Hand, that is part of our group since last
Yes.
year, he did actually elaborate it on. He's at Imperial College at the Data Science Center, and he made exactly that point. He didn't want to go any further about all the various aspects of data analytics and anything, except the difference between the use of data before you even talk about
Yes.
what data and all the rest of it.
And the people very often who are involved in the data are interested in data per se,
Yes.
not the questions.
Yes.
And they
Not
can't communicate
what is
always
But I
very
think
well.
there is
Yeah.
an important, to me anyway, important further point to be made here, which is that we're in an era now where data is just collected because it can be collected. And we are specifically, or particularly, in an era where data is therefore available, and it may have been collected for one purpose, but because it's available, it will be used for another purpose. Like it or not, this will happen.
But it's a very clear.
And this is actually quite an issue,
It's
isn't
a
it?
very clear example of the last few years how
Yeah.
the issue of blockchain emerged simply because in the financial sector data is available because of the massive big data and supercomputers they had, and because of that the blockchain, the distributed ledgers, have evolved with the ability of kind of transmitting the data, and but luckily, in a way, like you showed us today, central banks, for instance, are trying to not necessarily merely kind of follow the trend or the fashion, but they're trying to develop proof of concepts to see in what way more data or distributed ledgers, mutual ledgers, or so-called blockchains, could be useful to the same function. So maybe they have to develop new functions.
Because they know why they want it.
They know what they wanted, they know
Yes.
what regulations they could, they require, what distortion they need to identify in the process. Most of the data that is valuable and we are thinking of in relation to a particular object, I think is in relation to processes. Is that metadata that we're talking about? We're not talking about ordinary kind of numbers or whatever it is. So that is the one that is
Yes.
being collected automatically almost on the mobile, on everything else, and therefore is sold as data to be used. And you don't know what you use it for. Yeah, use it, it's big data. So the leveraging of the value of the real data, which is related to a purpose and collected for that purpose, is that the one that we're talking about, and brings in knowledge or brings in more progress to whatever you want to know.
And data linkage is a very big issue too, which I think one has to address. Linkage
Yes, yes.
between social factors, education, health, and that is just developing.
It's not.
It's
I mean, the modeling and all this complexity
Yes.
type of.
You should tell us much more
theoretical
about
background.
society.
Yes. Is that we are able to analyze
Yes.
with current analytical methods trends which otherwise we wouldn't. So we
Through
had
different
we
thinking.
had in the past year near here specialist, one of the best specialists in complexity, but also Sheila Rones, specialized in policy and complexity, but physicists. Both of them are physicists, and I think there is more and more theoretical background which underpins all these evolutions of hijacks
So I think it'd be very useful to define these different uses and categories,
yeah.
because I think different issues relate to the different purposes.
Actually, the Alan Smith, Alan, who is usually, we call him our nano specialist, but he's more and more specialist in all sorts of things. He's not here physically, he has to be somewhere. But he sent you a question and he said, look, for instance, with coming to real-time situations, UK leaving the EU, does that mean that our data will be no more connected with the data in EU? And does it mean that UK might therefore connect more data-wise with the Commonwealth on science technology matters? Well, you see, does it mean that there will be more connection between UK on the science and technology, which is the area that he's involved in, within the Commonwealth, once the UK sees itself not as much involved with Europe, in European community?
It's so linked in with Europe. I find that very
difficult. So would we want to pick up this issue in relation to, would suddenly data coming from Europe in relation to UK on science and technology?
Much of it is gathered using similar protocols and similar,
yes.
So you would have to start again if you were bringing
And
in
were
new
you to
areas,
bring
yeah.
the 53 countries in the Commonwealth, would that mean
It would be quite complex.
quite
yes.
a complex thing?
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
But
yeah,
But the
what
protocols,
is protocols?
similarity, you can't link oranges and apples. You have to.
the little bit I understand about big data is that it is the big data arise because of the use of computers and mobile devices. Yeah, and then because this is now ubiquitous, so that the volume of data is just enormous. So it has been said that by 2020, up to 20 billions of devices will be connected to the internet through the IoT. Can you imagine the data that arise out of that? Some may be useful, some may not be, some may be quite useless. This is why data has got to be analyzed. So that's why there is the rise of data science and data analytics. The analysis part will then give you information, and the information will then be, if applied to a certain area of interest, become knowledge. So, but to deconfuse all that, you need governments, government department, individual companies, whatever, need to know what kind of data they need in order for them to promote whatever they're promoting. So how do you deconfuse that? And you put that for the interest of developing countries, what kind of system do they have to put in place so that the data, so that first of all they can collect the data, they can analyze it for what purpose? Because some of the data that is generated goes all over the place, and people can pick this up, and it can be applied for both good and bad purposes. So the question that most countries will want to know, what kind of management system I need to put in place, so that I can pick up the data that I want, and I can analyze it for whatever purpose I want, for good governance, for example, for good governance and for responsible government. Nobody can tell you that. So this is where I thought the smart partnership process can bring people together to give the different perspective that government, heads of government in particular, can understand. This big data, I mean, is both promising, is both frightening. But what is the thing that government can do to put in place to benefit from this?
I think that's it. It's a very important question, very interesting question. One might remember that politicians, of course, okay, there's a joke always about politicians and statistics, that a politician uses statistics much as a drunk uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. And it's an interesting dichotomy that you will get serious politicians who are not just wanting to do that, but are actually wanting to know what the real information is that you can drag out of it and so forth. And what you're alluding to is how can governments structure things so that they're actually getting the information and so forth that they really need for those circumstances, rather than just seeing that statistics and so forth are collected, which are just being pulled out, as I said, more for support than illumination.
We just about,
Yeah.
in 2013, had a message from Bill Clinton on what is the value of smart partnership. Maybe we can send that. But it was in 8 minutes, wasn't it? I wasn't very sure.
It was a video at the
A
dialogue in
message sent on
Tanzania.
smart partnership. Yeah, very, very well articulated, but we don't quite know exactly what. If we were to kind of see in what sense the CPTM and the smart partnership movement has a role, actually, has a special place, and what could be done more so or differently, yeah, to bring these issues to the fore, but in a way that one can do something about it, not just kind of either write or complain. I mean, I was trying to show you here right from the beginning, there is an abundance of books and reading tips and articles every day, every second, that is on internet, that is on YouTube, that it is wherever it is. But just interesting, in only last month there were 2 weeks in London only, and only those that we knew about it. There were 3 books in 1 week, one after the other launched. One was about networking know-how, and she is a mathematician from Cambridge, Zoe Cunningham, and she wrote something which is very good, very handy for the pocket, Connecting for Success. It's called Networking Know-how, and the reason why she wanted to write this is because she was picked up from Cambridge by a software company in Cambridge, where she's still now, and what she found out she was best at, it wasn't the mathematics, the reason why they brought her up, but networking, and realized more and more that network is essential more than mathematics in current context. So it's very much, she came here and we will hear from her. She's very, very good, a very good example of, is very quite young, and doesn't brings in complexity or any other network theory. It's just a view from her own experience about why network is even more important, to know how to do it and how to go about and the value of it. And CPTM is thriving on networks and trying to understand all the time and get Common Secretariat and governments and whoever who about this networking for 30 years by now. There was another one that is very, 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 very extremely good actually, is very much connected also with examples from health. Julia Hobsbawm is called Fully Connected, Surviving and Thriving in an Age of Overload, but is probably one of the first of this kind, assessing with evidence even the social, as they call it, social impacts of the overload of internet and data, so-called data. There was another, same week, book launched by an American, very well known, Annemarie Slaughter. The book is somewhere packed to be given to our CPTM fellow tomorrow. The chessboard. And the chessboard is comparing the strategy that most of the ministries of foreign affairs or diplomats were using and still using currently the chessboard strategy, while in fact what is happening is a networking type of fluid interaction, and which manifests itself in a different way. So and she was Deputy Secretary of State, so she was quite brought evidence from real time. So there is an abundance of things going on around, but if we were to start identifying a few of the dimensions that have to be dealt with, rather than everything at the same time. So the other day we were discussing about the language that is evolving around the smart partnership for trying to deal with this data, abundance of data, information about data. And we said that you can see that there is a lot of language from the civil service, the technocratic kind of self-enclosed type of language. One would say opaque, but we all got used with it. It's perceived as neutral, it's perceived as impartial, but it's a technocratic language about all this data, and you don't know exactly what actually they're talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about too, because the decision making in civil service is completely changed. It's dysfunctional. A lot of people have courage to recognize. And there is the other language which you refer to, the more science language, the more kind of experts type of language, which again you can't understand, as Omar said. You say blockchain, or you say whatever you say, you can't quite understand. You have to make it simpler. So the only way simpler to make it is actually to emerge a language which has some of these smart partnership concepts, which also imbibes trust in you, in what you're talking about, telling me about data, and all the rest of it. So it's what we call a smart partnership language, which we always had since 1995, evolving. But now is even more so probably required in relation to this confusion around the value of data. So that is, one is a language, so I don't know, what do you think? There is, because when you express something, you have to express it into a language with everybody else, whoever they are, they can go along with it. And, yeah, we had experience with central bank governors, we had experience with people from statistics, from standards.
It's any topic, isn't it?
At any topic,
the most brilliant scientists can describe in very simple terms the most complex issues.
Yes.
It's really a question of understanding.
This is, so it's not the technocratic
language
thing,
is very important.
nor the, so it's a language which emerges around trying to make the best of this data, and that brings into knowledge. So I don't know if that shouldn't be one of the main, what do you think, Omar, one of the main preoccupation, not as such, preoccupation of the next few months.
I'm still unclear about what big data is. Does big data include this networking, this huge morass of information flowing around, or is it the big data sets? What? I don't know.
I think in practical
That's
terms,
very
do you want to refer into nuclear?
Well, I think it means different things to different people.
No,
but it's
no.
Basically, I think, the concept that
It shouldn't be used as
somebody
such,
referred
but-
to the Internet of Things. As the Internet of Things comes along, all sorts of pieces of information will be collected about everything you can imagine, and this is in vast quantities, zettabytes or whatever is a factor of 1,000 larger than a zettabyte, I don't know. And this potentially is perceived as having a use. And if something exists and is perceived as having a use, it will be used.
It will be used, yes.
I wonder if there is a point here, taking on what you did about the functionality of government and the way that government works and things being out there, is that we're now at a stage where the use of information and so forth can be put more into effect as well in helping our systems thinking. There was a tradition, of
That's
course,
it.
oh, you have a department of environment, you have a department of this, a department of that, and what they do is all separate, okay, and the minister or whatever closely guards their territory and won't speak really to anybody else, when actually we know that there is an interrelation in how these things work together, all right? And there needs actually to be a spirit, a sort of a smart partnership spirit, which will go across the functions and so forth of government to ensure that actually those things where there are interconnections and so forth going, where actually the use of data across between departments and so forth, okay, is a thing that we can try to get people to harness and so on for their benefit and so on, rather than having this thing where, as I said, you tend to have government carved up into particular areas and each of them jealous and so forth of their own area, and where actually you need not just smart partnerships going across between various governments, but within a government itself to try to make sure that that you can actually harness system thinking to make sure that what policies and so forth are put into place will actually do what they're meant to be achieving and so forth, and take the data and have the data and so forth there, and the knowledge to try to do something like that.
Yeah.
Could we, it's slightly different, I always think differently, but could we not have some data on CPTM from the beginning of our achievements, not, from different countries, and they could feed in some data of what we have achieved from the 90s to now? Because I think this would be very interesting in different countries. I don't know if we thought about that, but
Well, what means data again? Because if you take, we having to kind of reorganize things around, we came about a lot of physical things which could be transformed into data. And for instance, the images, pictures or videos, or in whatever form in the last 20 years, and the forms are so diverse, yes, and big albums, big albums of pictures. Well, what do you do with them? Because we're trying to, and we've done it almost in 3 weeks. We digitized all the pictures that we had. But the question was, how do you put them in such a way that they are useful? And the question was first, what do you use them for?
Yeah,
and
but
then so there is a
No, I think
kind of
Anna's issue is different. I did some time ago also saying that we are saying that we are useful for Commonwealth developing countries. If I'm a fleet operator, I will know where my bus is, where at any particular time, and whether I can shift them to go here and there. So for me, that will be very useful. If I'm a operator of a supermarket, I know from this branch that item is going better than the other kind of item, then I can do whatever it is. Government needs to know also what kind of data they require for the purpose of governing. So this is something to confuse. But what we are talking now is not big, it's not data. It is information from countries that we have been working in for them to say this is how CPTM has benefited us. And it will be useful and to complement what we think we have done for them.
yeah, but
Because at the moment...
There is only one problem. When we say what we think, as if of what country thinks, I mean, you are part of the country who will be saying how...
No, that's
big.
okay. But
I mean, this is the most kind of difficult thing to understand about our group. And because the providers are those of advice, or the members are those who are also the receivers at various points of time. So, and there isn't such a thing except a collective. It's a collective one which is called CPTM, yeah, which is formed of the people themselves. There isn't any separate entity or organization separate from those who are part of it. So if you ask myself, I mean, I am the one that I'm also a CPTM networking member. I'm not just in the hub. Yeah. So I myself, if I'm sending a question to myself, how useful was to use CPTM on this, that, then I will answer. But I know what you're saying, and I understand and I appreciate that. We're grasping with that since 1984. How can we relate the use of this smart partnership and CPTM type of network? How can we remind everybody about the fact that they should try to do more and more and pass it on? Because when we speak about countries, we speak about one individual. That individual may be a president as an individual. That individual may be somebody in, a businessman like John Carter. He's not talking about Hydroform. He's talking about him as John. So when we say countries, we talk about individuals. So one of the things that we've done in the last years was to try to keep weekly, Fridays, this interaction, tell them what some people do, what others don't do, what they could do. So is that kind of keeping, how could I say, a middle ground and everybody at the same level. It is true that not everybody understands what CPTM Collective does about each and every thing, but it's the best we could do, and we always can do more.
The idea to have an input of what one, say first what you have done, recorded, and then an input as to how they evaluate what we have done up to now. Omar said we get information, but if that information is repeated the same thing by 5 people or by 20 people, this is now statistics. Say out of 30 people that benefited from it, 10 people said it was excellent, the others said this or whatever else. And then this statistical, this data information, if you process it, becomes, you draw conclusions. What do you think?
When we had this anniversary about 2 years ago, we did actually launch this CPTM Smart Partners Open kind of resource in which members, as they come along, they
evaluate,
they evaluate, they send, and this is an open-ended kind of. It is on the website. Yeah. So what we should do, we quite like. Probably we should re-emphasize the need for everybody to try to send a little story, whatever story it is, but not necessarily that is good or bad, but reflections on how CPTM works.
But when it comes to something, Michaela, like big data or whatever topic, do you presumably get their views about how they perceive it and what they want from it before you crystallize what you're going to do?
Yes.
So in a way, there is feed-in to that, I assume.
Yes, there is. There is a need for that. Yeah. Well, I thought that this issue of the smart partnership revisited, meaning reinforced, by the way of this leveraging value of knowledge and data in the next few months. I think the issue brings in some kind of more operative aspects on how do you do that, because we were used to do it through dialogues, big dialogues, which were very good because it evolved, it mobilized, and there is a lot of evidence, as Omar said, so many dialogues, so many people at that dialogues, countries as a whole. You go, whichever country you go to, you will find sooner or later, that is in Foreign Affairs, in President Office, Minister of Finance, wherever, somebody saying, how are you? You're a smart partner. It's incredible. And they move from one institution to another. So we've done that kind of thing for 20-something years by now. But
I think
what is required is there are particular things that need to be done about data in relation to leveraging, to valuing the data in the context as different from before. You can't just have these big dialogues about what is data and smart partnership. They're useless. We want to avoid them.
Yeah. No, two
So-
things. Yeah, I mean, in many instances, when somebody say, "Oh, you are a smart partner," it's because they've been in one dialogue together.
But they got the feel for it.
But I think the next step would be to see that when a person say, "I am a smart partner," he actually knows what is a smart partner. He actually knows the principle of smart partnership and the practices of smart partnership. So that is the next step. Because I can say I am a smart partner, but I probably go home and didn't do anything very smart with my family. You know, so just to say that it's okay, but it needs to understand that. So we talk about the principle of smart partnership and the practices. The practices and the principle are generated through what we have been calling smart activities or smart engagement. And the first one is, of course, the dialogue. The dialogue is when it is like a business convention. You come there in a big number and big issues are discussed. But we have another one which is think tanking. Think tanking is more on a specific subject where you can go into depth. So if you are going to be the smart data is going to be useful for countries, then the think tanking on big data will be necessary, so that you can go into big detail to understand what this is all about. Then there is a third thing that we do, which is open house. For me, open house is when you share. It started with open house in Malaysia. Every festival day we have an open house, and the idea is to invite your friends into my house to share whatever I have with you. On the Muslim festival day, on Christmas, or a Chinese New Year, or an Indian festival day. Come into my house and share whatever I have. So open house in the smart partnership context is about sharing what have I done in my country. When you come to me in your dialogue, this is the thing that I have that I have done in the smart partnership context in my country. Come and share this with me. That is the three things, and I think we need to be clear ourselves that these are the three practices. But there is the fourth one, the practices of smart partnership at the individual level. This is something that I think needs to be followed. Another factor that we were discussing yesterday is about what CPTM has done is actually all the dialogue, the think tanking, the open house is a way of advising. What are the options? What are the successes and the failures? The way to do and the way not to do. That is a way of providing advice. But what is important is capacity to receive advice. And this is where in many countries there is not necessarily the capacity to receive advice. This is why foreign aid, this is why what international organization is trying to do to countries does not result in any good result, because the capacity to receive, the capacity to analyze the advice, and the capacity to implement the advice may not necessarily be there. And what we have done through the smart partnership processes, particularly during the think tanking session, we are when we say these are the thing, these are the issues, these are the thing that needs to be done. This is the way also to have it done. Part of our sharing of experiences is of sharing of ways to do things that we advise our government, and this because the way we do it is not we do it in a way among friends, rather than a big consultant coming from somewhere to talk down on the local. I think the receptivity is a lot is better, and the chances of passing information is also higher. And you know very well when civil Commonwealth when a Commonwealth organization or any international organization is asked to help a country, they will necessarily receive a consultant who will write a nice big report, and normally the report will end up on a shelf like that without necessarily being implemented. So the capacity to receive is something that I think we have also been doing, but I think we need to think a little bit more about that to see how in our activities we also build the capacity to receive.
Just again, based on what the group has, there are a few groups which are networking without even realizing with each other. We tried to emphasize that, particularly in the last year. We tried to raise the issue, which is what you were saying, but in a different way. We try to raise the issue of why is not a central bank, not necessarily the governor, when he says, I need some statistics now, real time, I don't want to wait for 3 years, when whatever it is. Why doesn't that bank, whoever is responsible for, calls National Statistics Office, says, can you come to me and tell me how do you do this, because I want it now, real time. And then the issue of data, or how you collect data, or for what purpose, will come about automatically. Then you would also say, well, there is a need for some kind of standard of this process, so everybody recognizes that this is the way we go about it. So again, you have the National Bureau of Standards and say, why don't you come and let's put together something which I have real-time data. Everybody will trust what I'm, because there is a standard that is ISO, that is national, whatever it is. So it is that kind of thing that we talked about for many years. Alex was talking about that in OECD. When he brought in science technology in OECD among the economists, there was a bit of a novelty. But there was the idea of interacting government departments and other type of non-interacting units. And one of the benefits of this discussion about data, real-time data, which is available anyway, to the point that is an overload rather than useful to you and confusion, is actually bring them together by necessity. So if a central bank governor requires every Monday to make a statement, then that statement requires some facts, some data, and that data could almost come real time, in all sorts of ways, in a dashboard or whatever it is, if only there will be some interaction with maybe the way the National Statistics Office is in that particular, maybe the way the cybersecurity unit in that country is trying to ensure that things are transferred. Maybe there are some standards. So it brings together, actually, there's a possibility of bringing together by necessity this valuation of data, disparate units, and not only government, but in companies and
That's
everywhere
already
else.
done, I think, with contracts to a small scale, but I do think the breaking down of
Yeah.
the barriers within government is
It's
a terribly
essential.
important issue. It
Yeah.
does provide an opportunity. I think
Yeah.
that was very important.
Mandates and
Yes,
new
yes.
recognition
It
of
is a
the
problem.
fact that, otherwise you work in an unregulated or in an illegal space.
It's a competitive space.
And a competitive
It's a
space.
waste of energy.
Yeah. So we do have in the kind of the possibility into this networks that they're not only these ones, but the science, technology, the Bureau of Standards, the central banks, the data and statistics outfits, the leading in carrying forward national visions. They're all kind of interacting, but there has to be a more specific awareness of why are they interacting and why there is a data sharing so that you can do something about it. So this is in a way, and we added additional kind of level since last year that national security, food-wise, climate change-wise, not just the usual national security issues, defense and so on, those are also coming into the discussion because data from them. So yesterday there was the issue of climate change brought in by St. Lucia, the High Commissioner, that will be a big issue at the Commonwealth, heads of government forthcoming. Now the climate change as such, however you want to discuss about it, the pros and cons and all the rest of it, is part and parcel of each and every kind of activity of a government or non-government or whatever it is. So, and there is a need for a data sharing of a kind which you trust.
There are different levels, aren't there?
There are different
There's
levels
the sort of
too.
satellite level, which is terribly important for environment, it's important for military surveillance, it's important for infectious disease surveillance, looking at the changing landscape. And nobody has actually looked at the connections between the two. And I think it's fascinating, the link between military health.
Yes, that's
And that could have really interesting repercussions.
yeah.
But the sort of levels of all this data, aren't they?
They used to be dealt with.
Yes, but
as
nobody
were
puts them together
separated.
at all.
No. So
And a lot of it is secret because it's military, but in fact it's being
well,
used
actually,
by...
they cannot do anything about. There are some particular aspects which have to be maintained in a particular way, as
Yes.
it is in pediatrician.
But I
or
don't think
whatever it
people
is.
realise how all these disciplines are actually using the same tools.
Correct. And maybe they collect data of similar.
They do, yeah.
On similar issues, but they
After
are
the
collecting-
Ebola outbreak, a lot of this, mapping the
Yeah.
changing
Yeah.
environments so that you could predict outbreaks, that's all coming from satellite. The same satellites used for military movements.
This is. So that's the
Yes.
reason why in
So
the last
that
2
fits
years,
in.
yes, the national security has broader understood in addition
Yes,
to
it comes right down to the
security.
different levels.
Yes, yes. Anything else that we could, Anna, you were bringing the idea about, because we need to discuss it, because you research it, you've got people to research it for you.
Yeah.
How, for instance, these issues of blockchain, and why is blockchain related to blockchain technology?
Well, I am completely ignorant.
No.
That's why I thought.
That's
You know,
why you
we
speak
need
a smart
knowledge.
partnership language rather than a blockchain technology language. Nobody understands it,
So something
or
to
whatever
talk
else.
about it so that we could have more knowledge about what it's about. And also, as they particularly mentioned, Swaziland, that they're helping, one of these companies was helping Swaziland and Zambia. So that it doesn't concern us, but we'd like to know more about it. Is it because they do say that they can watch every stage of where the money is going? I would love to hear if it's true or something about it, to have someone to talk about it for everybody else.
Okay, so probably when if we're having this at the end of June, we can bring up the issue because quite a number of central banks and governors are involved in
Yeah, of course.
charities and foundations
Yes.
and so on. So we could bring in the issue of would a blockchain or distributed ledger be useful in tracing how the money are being without any, obviously intellectually you say yes it could, why shouldn't it?
So we've just
They are tracing wine, you know that.
no
It's the biggest, one of our member, Chainvine, yeah, he introduced use of blockchain technology in trying to trace, you know, if the wine is of that particular vineyard and particular year, particular quality. And there are a number, so there is a blockchain shaped around trying to ensure that the wine, yes, indeed, is.
Quality standard.
Yeah.
It's the same, yeah, well, not only quality standard, but it is what it is, rather than,
been
Yeah.
adulterated.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
similarly
Sure,
with
Olive oils.
similarly, you can think of anything: olive oils, coffee, tea, you name it. So yes, there is no reason
Just
why
a
it
bit more
shouldn't.
knowledge than
E-
you
Is it
even
what you think
people
it
and their
is?
ancestry and their education and everything else.
But yes, yes. I mean, I don't think we should go into blockchain technology now, should we, Omar? But the reason why it's mentioned blockchain technology is because there is a question of data that is being not adulterated by anybody. Once it's being dealt with, everybody else knows about it, and so on and so on, and nobody is corrupting the system. That's the point.
That's what we would
Yeah,
like to know.
that is a point. Yeah, and that is possible. So, yeah, okay. George, in Cyprus, any developments that you heard about around
Instead
the
of
issue of
statistics
data
now,
instead of
we
statistics?
talk about politics.
No, the statistics.
Statistics.
Yeah.
Well,
As
CPTF
being part
did
of European,
offer some
yes,
advice as to how to organize statistics department,
yeah.
and it was highly appreciated. Yes.
And it was about the R&D statistics, the environmental statistics.
Yeah.
So I
Of course,
suppose
yeah.
one could review that from the point of view of
Indeed.
data. Yeah. Anyway, Omar, you want to round up
More
the
difficult.
kind of, but Omar is the best smart partner we ever known. That's the reason why the Prime Minister always called him to say 5 minutes before somebody came to him, what are the composites? What can I do with it? And Omar had to say it in a way that it wasn't science, it wasn't just saying nothing as a good civil servant, but it was what he could get from the company that he was meeting.
Well,
So what did we talk about?
well, we wandered.
in a nutshell?
We wandered around the mulberry bush a little bit. I don't know. I thought I started with reaffirming the relevance or the value of the Commonwealth Smart Partnership Initiative, and try to put that in the context of current issues, which is now big data, and that got involved with blockchain, and I'm glad nobody mentioned bitcoins. And then,
Well, there are so many buzzwords that we could mention.
yeah. And Josh started by saying that if you have about confusion, not Confucius, but confusion at various levels. But I thought if there is no knowledge, if you have zero knowledge, then there is zero opportunities for confusion, right?
Well, it's confusion about the details and not about the big issue. You start with a big issue and you say, I don't know enough. And then you learn some, say, okay, I understand this,
Okay.
but what about that? Huh? And you carry on. Is
So
there a
that-
God?
so-
Yes. How do I know of this?
So,
But when I ask another question, why did this particular illness happen? Is it due to God? And then you investigate things further until you reach a final stage you understand, or you get fully confused.
So,
So we'll
that-
suddenly
that-
confused.
then I think it goes back that
Yeah.
the less you know, the less confused you are.
You think so?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Right.
So
Right.
so then knowledge.
Increasing knowledge
Yeah.
means confusion over a wider and
Yeah.
wider
So
range.
the less knowledge you have, the less confused
Well,
you are.
what
It's
do
a
they
very
say?
good, it's a very good Trinidadian word, you know,
Yeah,
confusion. Whereas in Trinidad, confusion, that was one of the things. And the key element that they had there about confusion was when the Prime Minister had at one point said, money is not the problem. Okay? And this, after a little confusion, became money is no problem. And the difference was not entirely appreciated.
Yeah, okay. But the less knowledge you have, the less confused you are.
And
But
the
if
more
you are-
confident you are.
The less confused you are.
The
But
more
if you are not confused, there's no opportunity for anybody to make money out of you.
That's the idea.
Perhaps you're less
Yeah.
receptive
So-
to
That's why people keep bringing up new knowledge
Right.
to confuse you,
Right.
so that they can benefit out of that.
Perhaps you can say, but almost turn it the other way around, that if you're not confused, you know nothing.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But then you are
And-
so confident. You are so confident.
And
about
I
it
cannot,
because you don't understand it.
then I cannot make any money out of you. So I try to confuse you more, and then in order for you to get
At a higher
deconfused,
level, yeah.
you hire me. So this is why new
No,
things
no,
keep.
yeah, there's a difference. You confuse them more, but at a higher level. The important is the level of confusion, not the amount of confusion.
Yeah.
But it's both level and amount, isn't it?
Right.
You win both
So
ways.
you do
I'm more
research,
confused
you
about
do a
even
master's
more.
degree, and you investigate things. Then you do a PhD, and you are more confused. You deal with details
Yeah.
there. You say, this is how it is. And then there are so many details. Yeah. You dig a hole, you dig a garden, you get a what is it? A bachelor's degree. Then you dig a little plot, and you get a master's degree. And then you dig a little hole, and you get a PhD.
you dig a deeper hole for yourself.
You're a postgraduate.
Right.
Anyway, to come back to our discussion, and we spend a lot of time on data and big data, but we are not quite sure when that data becomes statistics, and when statistics become information, when information becomes knowledge, and that knowledge is useful for some people, or not all the data that is translated into knowledge is useful to everybody. There are certain specific data which translate into specific knowledge, which is useful to certain specific recipient. To decompose that is something that I think that is the work of that we need try to do within the smart ownership context, as far as our customers, if you like, which are developing countries, particularly presidents, because many of them are quite confused. And at the moment, there are people taking advantage of this by going to countries to mount seminars and conferences at a fee. And I think that's not necessarily
That's probably correct.
confusing to the recipient countries.
I
So-
suppose what is even probably more questionable is that there are data centers emerging in most of the countries. You take Africa, just in the last 10 years with the mobile technology, which the countries themselves are not aware of what that data what is happening with that data, and it has a value. It's a new economy. So it's happening without even knowing that it's happening. Never mind about the conferences, which are kind of well outdated. So if we were to kind of close down, I mean, one of the things that probably in a dialogue mode, think tanking dialogue mode needs to take place beside the very specific aspects of this issue of leveraging data, smart partnership. One of the aspects should be that one can push the limits of the current institutional governance and all the rest of the regulatory frameworks that one has where we are working through currently. But there is very little time still to do so. There are new institutional frameworks, new legal frameworks emerging, new relationships, new accounting procedure, new definition of accounting. We know that. New legal professions because of this ability of data and technologies that analytics that can make the mechanical things robotized, that is good or bad or whatever it is. So we push the limits into what is called late 20th century, early 21st century of the current institutional infrastructure, national and otherwise, developed or developing countries, to a limit that, unless it's being managed, is going to be an explosion of a kind, not in nuclear explosion, that can be managed, but an explosion of which will have consequences which otherwise were one to be aware about the positive aspects of leveraging value of data and changing as you go along, bit by bit, the structures you are in, the relationships and the legal and the rest of it, and adopting consciously accounting procedures or other things which makes easy life, yeah? So if one does that, is aware that that will happen, as different from pushing the limits of maintaining the structures we are in and defending the structures we are in, including CPTM. I mean, CPTM is a concept of the 20th century. And that's why now we see that people are referring to us a Commonwealth Smart Partnership Initiative. It doesn't need to say technology management. It doesn't need to say even Commonwealth, actually. It's a Smart Partnership Initiative. So that is the main aim of it. So thank you, Omar and George. And I mean, it was a discussion of a typical nature that we tried to bring in. Not necessarily the key issues, but just some of the issues. And we do have quite concrete initiatives, specialized, within which we can probably progress and maybe highlight for the Commonwealth heads of government that this kind of smart partnership platform in the Commonwealth and otherwise is a very effective thing in the new context to come, not the one that was. New context to come. So thank you very much.